This was me in 1964. I was in the Daisy ad, which was a political commercial. The fear of nuclear war that we had as children, I never thought our children would ever have to deal with that again. And to see that coming forward in this election is really scary.
A foreign policy expert went to advise Donald Trump, and 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. If we have them, why can't we use them?
I want to be unpredictable.
Wouldn't you rather, in a certain sense, have Japan have nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
What safeguards are there to stop any president who may not be stable from launching a nuclear attack?
The commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief.
Bomb the shit out of them.
Vote for Hillary Clinton on November 8th. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
On the Boston Red Network and WBRN Radio in Boston, the title of our episode is sort of an unusual title, but nonetheless, America First versus the Rocket Man. Of course, America First is the program of one DJ Trump. He was at the United Nations and he was there expounding upon it in what the Washington Post called I had it right in a minute there, but anyway, it's pugilism. In other words, it means boxing, basically brutalizing people, pugilistic type of speech to the United Nations. Very interesting indeed. Of course, Rocket Man is the leader of the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. An interesting situation there. We came in here with a commercial that was ran by the Hillary Clinton campaign during the 2016 contest. It was featured the woman that was a child actress at the time in 1964. Was featured in what was known as the Daisy Girl commercial. A little girl, she was 3 years old at the time. She's now 56 or 57, but nonetheless, the idea there was the little girl was counting and an atomic bomb was set off. Well, that is where we are basically today, and we'll go out with the original commercial with President Johnson speaking there, basically saying, we'll either love each other, euphemistic term, or we'll go into the abyss. Now, this whole situation here with the People's Democratic Republic of Korea is a very interesting situation. DJ Trump has threatened to destroy them. Something cannot be idly set aside when, in fact, the U.S. has the firepower to do it, using strategic bomber stealth technology, etc., cruise missiles, various other missiles, ballistic missiles there. But here's where the situation is. Will Trump make good on his promise? And many feel that that will happen, what is termed as a preemptive strike against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The issue is not whether or not DJ Trump would strike today, next year, or 6 months from now. The point is what will happen after the strike. In other words, the military people always say, well, we'll perform the mission and it'll be a quote-unquote clean mission. It is never a clean mission. How many people will survive the attack? Will just the leadership and the supporting cast there be eliminated from the play, so to speak? Well, if you're running a reality TV show, I suppose now they can broadcast it 24/7. But the problem there is it's a militarized situation, and they have been in these little, as LBJ would say, nickel and dime wars, conflicts, what do you want to call them, Afghanistan, Iraq, then later into Libya, the monster campaign, we call that one. But it was a few days, basically they started bombing to soften up, and to then enter the country. Now, entering the North is not part, first of all, with the mines and everything. Forget it. Their idea is just to knock out some sites and to decapitate the leadership, or at least parts of leadership, whatever their scheme is. But when you have a situation as it is, a battle-ready battlefield, they have thousands of troops, hundreds of thousands of pieces of artillery already in place. And some of the so-called experts are saying, well, it would take a number of days for the U.S. to get the materials that they need. That is just flummery. The materials they need for the type of strike he's talking about are already in the area, perhaps move a carrier there, but they had a carrier there. That is not even an issue. But the results of the campaign, and this is something DJ Trump and company have not thought out very well with this third-rate generals he's surrounded by, like Mad Dog Mathis and the rest of these characters. Many of these characters have been in the military 30 to 40 years and have never won a war, period. They can't point to one. Some of them were on the heels of Vietnam. They lost that one. The conflict in Afghanistan and Kabul is still going on. They have not won it. They've not even come close. And the Iraq War, well, the ISIS organization had parts of the country, and they still have parts of the country that is not out there. And so, in other words, all of it is up in the air. And this whole American First scheme, DJ Trump went on to talk about other countries, the Iranians. He perhaps would cancel the agreement set up by President Obama. Well, if he canceled, so what? The conflict will just continue on in the Mideast. That's been off of the pages of the, basically, and one reason for that is in Syria, the rocket forces, the air forces of the Russian Federation under Vladimir Putin have been there and done the heavy lifting and basically put ISIS out of work, or out of business, we'll say. The ultra-right fascistic Bibi Netanyahu was in the office there, basically saying he's cheering on Trump. Well, this is not good. Remember, once they had the axis of evil and all this sort of thing. Anyway, replaying those tapes and the extension of the Wilsonian foreign policy, Woodrow Wilson being a racist par excellence. That does not do the country any good at all. And particularly at the United Nations. Now, there was a call when the certain resolutions were passed at the on the Mideast and the Zionists there, that the U.S. should withdraw from the UN, cut its funding off, period. Well, many progressive people throughout the world have long called for the UN to move out of New York. It would take a number of years to completely move out, but they could start building this year. And it usually takes about a year or so to build a new headquarters. And perhaps in some of the countries, they could have a temporary housing, and as they did in San Francisco while the headquarters in New York was built. So those things could be accomplished. There's no reason to be there. That is where we agree with the Trump when he was on the campaign trail, that the whole idea of the UN as it is constituted now, with those old World War II relics, the Security Council, that's outdated. It should be much more representative of the world, and if that happened, it would be like the General Assembly, to whom he spoke. We'll incidentally cover the meeting with some of the speakers, at least edited portions, on BR on the World. That is our international program. We're bringing BR on the World back, and it will return hopefully this week or this weekend. So that will be back where we'll be covering more international affairs, and whatever to start, excuse me, is with the UN. So the questions that we put out there, what happens after the attack, that is very, very important. particularly in the Korean Peninsula. And there have been various drills going on. They've had live fire drills, etc. The Chinese Defense Forces have been also drilling. The Russian Federation. All these people border Korea and the Democratic People's Republic. Now, there should be some clear demarcations here. If China would just tell DJ Trump, look, you move on the north, we'll move on you. And this type of useless saber rattling would quit. But the problem is misfire here, and of course if that happens, all bets are off. So then we asked our question, will this be a quote-unquote conventional operation? Or will this be a nuclear weapons involved? More than likely, I think it's probably 95% likely, if there's a fire, there will be some types of nuclear weapons involved in the situation. Now, these nuclear weapons are not static, they're dynamic. They can be moved around, they have mobile launchers, they have various ways of delivering the warheads to wherever, including to Seoul by just using larger halisters. So in other words, they can be delivered. And once nuclear weapons are dropped, the types of weapons they have, I can recall living in Seattle at the time of Mount St. Helens. It can be heard around the world and will affect the climate further than what it is today. So this is why we did, doing the broadcast here, to alert people that this is the number one news item, not some of the machinations that is happening in Washington, but we'll go to those now, and many of them out there. There's the Republican effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They've been working on this one for a very, very long time, period. And incidentally, the other country that is Venezuela, we didn't talk about that. I was just looking at a Reuters dispatch with China. China is, of course, in there and assisting the government in Venezuela with President Madro's there and resolving their matters here. They are a good friend, no doubt about that. They are involved in, this is China, in the petro business, period. Two countries have strategic partnerships, that's according to the official Chinese Xinhua news agency there. And the policy of China towards Venezuela will not change. So that tells people some things about where they stand there. And the Iranian foreign minister, incidentally, talking about DJ Trump, that his ignorant hate speech that belongs in the in medieval time. So basically, a lot of people were laughing at that there was a lot of buffoonery going on there at the UN. What does it amount to? Well, we'll just see that this type of policy, when you talk about America first, you're talking about an isolationist policy. Why would you talk about an isolationist policy at an international meeting? It doesn't make very much sense at all. 25 million people, which is much larger than the Zionist state in the Democratic Republic of Korea. Period. So in other words, they've been in this business longer than I've been in the business. So in other words, since 1950, the conflict there has been ongoing in the Korean Peninsula. They fought a war down to the 33rd parallel, and that was the end of the story right there. Now, with Hurricane Martyr is, let's see, where is Martyr? It's a Category 5, heading towards Puerto Rico. Now, let's see, let's go to it. We're talking about climate here in this, and climate effects there. Yeah, residents of Puerto Rico, dispatch out of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Martyr massive Category 5, excuse me, that could be coming there. Forecasters say the hurricane is on track to plummet St. Croix in the Virgin Islands and heading towards Puerto Rico. Also there, the island hasn't seen, let's see, this is 3.5 million since Hurricane George, that was in 1998. So in other words, more hurricanes are coming. National Weather Service, potentially catastrophic with rainfall that could total 12 to 18 inches here. And we'll see. When you start dealing with these Category 5 and Category 4 storms, Martyrs swirls westward, another hurricane threatening parts of the East Coast from Delaware to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So in other words, what is left of Hurricane Jose, we forgot about him, has weakened and expected to pass well offshore. So evidently Jose has decided not to visit. But that goes on. Let's get to the open. Let's get to the Affordable Care Act. Now, the Republicans, this is Hopalong Cassidy. He's out of Louisiana, senator there. And Graham of South Carolina. They propose another infamous scheme. This is in the Post. The Senate Republicans, White House press ahead Tuesday with their suddenly resurgent effort to undo the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Their attempt were dealt a setback when a bipartisan group of governors and several influential interest groups came out in opposition. There, the AARP, the American Hospital Association, both of which urged a no vote there. The measure marks the last gasp attempt to get Obamacare. They have to do it by the 30th, but they can't use September. They can't use reconciliation. Now, this is the Graham Hopalong Cassidy bill would convert funding from the Affordable Care Act into block grants. That has been floated before and would cut Medicaid dramatically over time. Now, the bill is coming 2 months after a previous attempt that failed. The deadline is the 30th for the Senate action. Senate leaders, a group of 10 governors, argued against the Hopalong Cassidy Graham bill, wrote that they prefer a bipartisan push by Lamar Alexander. He is from Tennessee, and Patty Murray out of Washington State. The governors signed a letter particularly notable since some are from states represented by GOP types. Bill Walker out of Alaska signed it. Murkowski is from there. Could be a vote. Murkowski said Tuesday afternoon that she's still weighing her options, explained how her position on the bill might ultimately differ from her opposition to the repeal effort that failed dramatically. If it can be shown that Alaska is going to be disadvantaged, you gain additional flexibility, then I could go back to Alaska and I can say, okay, let's walk through this together. That's where it would be different. But Murkowski, who has been in close contact with Walker, that's the governor there, and the other Alaska senator, what's his name, Dan Sullivan, said he was still thinking about it, but well, anyway, it doesn't say very much. On the other side, a group of 15 Republican governors announced their support for the Senate bill. Not unusual there. This Blevin out of Kentucky, well, he'd be for anything. And let's see who else has come out. Well, now listening. Forget about him. And DJ Trump is at the UN there. That was Ducey, I think they were talking about. I believe he's out of Arizona, but doesn't influence anybody. Medicaid expansion on the ACL. There, many Republican-led states decided against the expansion since the Supreme Court decision allowed them to opt out. But this would be a detrimental step for Louisiana now. This is from Rebecca G. She posted a letter there. She's out of Louisiana. That's a state represented by Hopalong Cassidy. Walker has not yet played a visible role in the debate until now. Now he's out of Alaska. Many remote areas premiums for the ACL average about $1,000 a month for an individual, according to most recent federal data there. Given the complex nature of the Hopalong Cassidy bill, it is difficult for state officials and healthcare analysts to predict exactly how much money a given state would gain or would lose legislation, but early estimates suggest states that expanded their programs on their Medicaid and actively participate could face major cuts. And another problem is we won't get a complete score on the Hopalong Cassidy bill. They'll get a partial score from the Congressional Budget Office. Of course, the governors are the most that Kasich, he's out of Ohio. Brian Sandoval, out of Nevada. With Heller. Well, Heller is going down the drain anyway. He's a senator from there. Minority Leader Schumer of New York said he's confident no Democrat would vote for the bill. There's no reason for any Democrat to vote for the bill. Alexander played down expectations of reaching agreement this week, telling reporters anyway he's waiting and seeing. This is not about substance, the House statement. The Republican leadership is so eager to pass the Hopalong Cassidy bill that they are not in favor of the bipartisan negotiation. Many Democrats, including Murray, said she hoped the talks could be savaged. Salvaged or not, who knows? They'll be savaged. That's probably there. So that is where the machinations are. I think the old adage is Democrats move forward and Republicans fall in line. Well, that kind of problem there is, will the Republicans fall in line enough to pass this and it will be a disaster? Well, all these organizations have lined up behind it in opposition. I said it's unusual to vote on health care before Congress knows what it is. Well, no doubt about that. This is a very complicated piece of legislation they've thrown out there. And one of the big problems is South Carolina, a very poor state. This Graham here, but usually messes around in foreign policy. Hopalong Cassidy's Louisiana is a very, very poor state. And to cut back and block grant it, that just means block grant with what? In other words, you could send a few $1 million to a state and they could use the block grant to set up tennis courts. That happened when Reagan block granted things. So in other words, it's a problem to begin with, period. And I think this Ducey, DJ Trump had been in touch with him. But on these other people, Democrats, they point out, and this has been pointed out before, would affect an industry that accounts for 1/6 of the U.S. economy. So in other words, if you start tinkering around with it and cutting, health services will also be cut, which will effectively result in people being scattered about, so to speak, and redundancies, layoffs would occur there. And this is period. Oh, let me just jump back over. Usually we don't do this, but the Korean Republic and Japan reacted to the speech with jitters and surprise. I'm not sure why they're surprised, but close allies threatened not just to act there, but also to destroy the entire country. Well, allies, Japan was silent on threats to bring war to their neighborhood while China and Russia warned that risked fueling tensions, no doubt about that, from China and from the Russian Federation. The Chinese Globe Times ran a cartoon depicting the bully pulpit, showing Trump holding a megaphone shouting "America First," and while the Chinese daily newspaper said Trump's speech were full of sound and fury. And let me see if we can get this cartoon here, and we'll put it on the deal if we can get it. I'm not sure if we get it. Oh yeah, this is him. He's ranting and raving with his megaphone. We have to put that one up there. We'll have to get a picture of Rocket Man. We've got some of Rocket Man. The South Korean president, Mr. Moon, whom accused of trying to appease the Democratic Republic of Korea, was wanting to talk to the regime, has been trying hard in recent weeks to show he is in sync. Well, America First doesn't make much sense there. Moon spokesman pointedly avoided reacting to the total destruction. Well, he'd have to watch out for that, because maybe he'd receive total destruction, a period. So who knows where it's going? I mean, this whole thing is a very important event that could go in a situation that causes problems. Any military conflict means the deaths of civilians, especially awed as the U.S. Considers the Koreans and Japanese their allies. This was from Andrei Kimov, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Upper House in the Russian Federation, told the Interfax news agency. While Russian officials were initially excited about Trump's readiness to overturn the international order, promise of detente, that sort of slipped there. Unlike his predecessors, he didn't put Russia the main threat to humankind. Well, he's had too many other threats going along at the same time here, and as we talked about, Venezuela, Cuba's in the mix. Unusual there, but not unusual. One other little thing here. Evidently, the RNC, that's Republican National Committee, has paid $230,000 towards DJ Trump's ever-mounting legal bills. And they are obviously mounting. So who knows? I mean, it's just kind of a situation that basically sticks out there. Let me just quickly go to the BBC here. And then we'll do the sports and get out of here, and you can hear LBJ. More than 200 people died in the earthquake in Mexico. So we'll see that goes along. From the BBC on what they call UN hate speech. Well, what can they expect? The diatribe of, he didn't have his red tie on there. The president included Iran, a small group of rogue regimes. The people in the north have not responded to him as of yet. So who knows? We'll have to put this picture up here. There's a picture of 4 different people here. Mr. Ung, President Assad, President Mundros, and the Ayatollah Khomeini. So people were just sitting there. From the BBC was an eloquent exposition of his American First doctrine, but at the same time contained some and perhaps unexpected, wholesome and unexpected praise for the United Nations as a body, in contrast to the focus on globalism that he drives so much of the foreign policy discussed. since 1990. This is by Jonathan Marcus from the BBC. Needless, Trump's worldview contains many contradictions. Well, the whole thing contained many contradictions, so we don't know. So let's do the sports. We just finished What Happened by Hillary the Monster Clinton. Interesting book. She starts and closes as being a quote-unquote Methodist, a follower of John Wesley. Oh, well. The Twins were in the New York Yankees 5-2. In 11, the Red Sox were in the Camden Yard. Baltimore shut out the Orioles 1-0. The Dodgers were in Philadelphia, Phillies 6-2. The Brewers were in San Diego, and they won a game there 1-0. Kansas City was in Toronto 5-2. The Athletics were in the Motor City, Athletics 9-8. And in 10, the Cardinals were in Cincy, Cardinals 8-7. In another game, all these extra inning games, the Mets were in Florida. 10 innings they went, 5-4 Mets. The Cubbies were in Florida, also Tampa, 2-1 the score, Cubbies. The Nationals were in Atlanta, 4-2 Nationals over Atlanta. The White Sox were in Houston, Astros 3-1. Cleveland was in California, 6-3 to score. Cleveland over the Angels. The Rangers and Mariners, Rangers 3-1 out in Seattle. The D-backs and Padres down in San Diego, 6-2 Padres over the D-backs. And a game we tuned into, the Giants finally won the game, 4-3, the Giants over the Rockies. The Giants had 12 hits, no errors, and the Rockies had 10 hits. Mr. Dyson was the winner. Mr. Russian was the loser. So that is the sport. Very quickly here, look at the standings. We'll stay on this because of some of the wild card games there. I think the Brewers in one game. The Brewers and I should have written it down. Anyway, in the American League East, the Red Sox are on top. The Yankees are now just 3 games back. And Tampa Bay is 14 back. Orioles 14.5 games. They won't make it up there. And Cleveland, of course, clinched the Central. The Twins are 16 games back. Kansas City is dropping 20.5 games back in the American League West. Houston has clinched. And the Angels are 16 games back. The Rangers are 18 back. They're all bunched up together. The Mariners 18.5 games back. In the National League, the Washington Nationals have clinched the National League East. And then comes Miami, who is 20.5 back. The Cubbies are still out there. And the Brewers are 3.5 games back. The Cards dropped to 6 games back. And in the West, Dodgers have got a playoff berth. They haven't outright clinched yet. And let's see, the D-backs are 9.5 games back. The Rockies are 14 games back. And that is the standings here. And the title of our episode, America First versus Rocket Man. Rocket Man being Mr. Kim Jong-un. Good day. And incidentally, we go out with President Johnson from the campaign in 1964. In that campaign, just a little bit about it, Barry Goldwater was a right-wing conservative there, and of course it scared the hell out of people. And that's the difference in 64 and 2017. People don't appear to be particularly scared about this now. In Tokyo and, of course, in Seoul they are, because their greatest fear is that DJ Trump and his generals will do a preemptive strike, and the consequences could not be good. They perhaps will reach some military objectives, but as far as the people, you could have thousands of people injured and dead, and more than with the earthquake in Mexico. And of course, if nuclear weapons get involved in this mix, you could have fallout reaching all the way to Baltimore. So those are some of the problems here with this reckless talk. And you can understand on the other side, the Korean Democratic Republic, what will they do? Perhaps they'll do a preemptive strike. I mean, there's a lot of gambling here, and when you have inexperienced people or antiquated generals, it's not a good situation. The same problem we had with the climate issue, and now you have these hurricanes and storms lining up one after another and all coming to an American TV set or very close to you, on its way to Puerto Rico now, Marner. So in other words, here they come. And if you don't get the tornado, you get the rains and the wind, and they're just cleaning up in Texas from Hobby. Key West, I'm not sure what they have going down there right now. They're trying to clean the place up. I'll have to see where H is there. I noticed she had landed and the plane was in the rain. Or some plane was in the rain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.